Welcome back, everybody, to the School Leadership Show. This is Mike Dowdy, and I am joined, as always, by co-host and educator extraordinaire, Jen David Lang. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Mike. Always a pleasure.
And we have a very special guest with us here today, Morgan Michael, who has written a book from burnt out to fired up, reigniting your passion for teaching. So, Morgan, welcome to the show.
What an honor to be here. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jen. It's a delight. I always love doing interviews for podcasts, and I'm a big fan of yours. So honored to be here today.
Oh, what a sweetheart. My one listener from Vancouver. So it was funny because right before we got on first of all, happy International Women's Day.
Thank
you. Yes, indeed.
Yes. Shout out.
Anchor that right here to March 8th. So, before we got on, I was having a conversation with my bride she's a physical therapist, but works in elementary schools and public schools. And I told her about the book that we were going to talk about today. She's like, oh my God, I can't wait. She's got to find me some stuff. So, that's my N of one. Well, two, if I count myself, definitely feeling this. So why this book? It seems so self-evident, but I want to make you say it out loud. So why a book about burnout for educators at this particular moment?
Oh my goodness. Where do I even start, right? Well, what's ironic is I wrote this book on the very eve that the world sort of shut down in 2020. So we didn't even know the extent to which burnout would really affect the educator population. And of course, over time throughout that year, I sort of changed it and altered it so that it would reflect some of the current events around the pandemic and all of the fallout from that. But essentially, why now? Teachers are more stressed out than they have ever been. And when I mention teachers, it's teachers in the classroom, it's the administrators, it's the paraprofessionals who support them, it is the whole myriad of people, the team around these children. And they are so stressed out because the demands are higher. I think this pandemic has certainly brought a lot of stressors to the forefront in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom in our own lives, but then also in the lives of our students. And so not only are we feeling the stress as adults ourselves, as care providers, but we're also feeling that secondary stress from our students and then from their subsequent stressors at home. So there's so many facets to where the stress comes from. Obviously, we have lots of challenges around budget cuts and all of that kind of thing as well. So I think that although burnout, and we can talk about this more after, burnout isn't just about, you're on your bathroom floor and you're crying. Like burnout looks like you're exhausted every day or you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can do this today. I might just need to call in sick. It's that feeling of dread when you look forward to the day. And I think for a lot of educators, especially the ones who got into it for the right reasons, to serve these kids, to be part of these wonderful humans' lives and to help sort of create this sense of efficacy within our students, help co-create that. I think it feels really disheartening to feel yourself slip into that. And so I think that's why, like when you take the temperature read at a lot of different schools, many people are feeling tired, stressed, burnt out.
So I could add to that, Mike, I think that you make a good point, right? It's not just the pandemic, right? Educators were stressed out and burnt out before the pandemic. You mentioned in your book, right? Yeah. Inadequate pay, lack of full appreciation, working with students with all kinds of needs. But what I'm seeing is that during the pandemic, because it's become almost near universal that some type of stress or burnout has hit so many educators, it's almost now okay to talk about it. Yes. And maybe that's why it's coming to the forefront. I don't know.
Yeah, like I wonder about that too. I think definitely when you reach a tipping point too, and you hear, they say that a lot of this culture is contagious, right? So if there is some vulnerability and some courageousness that comes out, in the staff room where people are going, boy, I'm really struggling. And the opportunity for individuals to lean on each other and to bring that to the forefront, I think it's a wonderful thing. Because I think within the context of this book, I offer a lot of really helpful strategies, I hope, or things that I hope people find helpful. But I also know that sometimes you have to reach outside of that and seek help for sure if you're feeling sort of overwhelmed. But I think the first step is being able to say it. And when you hear other people say it, it sort of makes you feel less alone. It takes you out of that place of self-isolation, which is where a lot of us go to when we're in that fight or flight or sort of stressed out mindset.
And Morgan, you're currently a classroom teacher, correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
say more about your gig. What do you do? What's your day job?
Yeah. So I'm actually a kindergarten grade 1 classroom teacher. I've been teaching for almost over 14 years, so almost 15 years now. And so I feel like I'm getting to that place of, I don't know if I want to say I'm seasoned, but I definitely feel comfortable in the classroom and I love this age group. And, even for me, I've had to really dig deep and put some of my practices into place in a very sort of a very clear and intentional way, because I have felt the stressors myself, from some of the people that I'm supporting around me, some of the stressors that they're going through. My day is very full, and so it's so much fun. It's one of the most exciting things to walk into the classroom right now. We're in that springtime, so we're seeing a lot of learning kind of come to fruition and the consolidation. So that gives me a lot of joy. But there are hard days, when you're teaching full time. I totally 100% understand that feeling of burnout that can come up.
So also joining us, Claudia Wheatley. Hi, Claudia.
Hi there.
You want to tell folks your connection to Morgan?
Well, we're very honored to be the publisher of her book, and we're excited about it. And I serve as education specialist and the author liaison. So we're getting to know her better, and we've already got her contracted, or we're working on that for her first event with us. And so lots going on. We're just really excited to have her, because these are times where her message is so needed.
Well, and we're thrilled to have you part of the conversation too. Solution Tree Press does a ton of has put so much goodness out into the field. So thank you for that. Now, so it was interesting. What I really liked is the way you approached in this book was, you didn't just say, okay, people are burnt out. Here's a couple things you can do, peace out. You went into the research first. Can you talk through a little bit about sort of what guided your thinking, what you found that either affirmed what you thought about burnout and how to combat it, and maybe a little bit about what surprised you too out of the research?
Yeah. So, and this is what I love about Solution Tree is it is so renowned as a research-based, research-backed publisher. And I've seen that, in all the conversations that I have with people on social media, people really appreciate that. So I felt honored to be part of that team. And yeah, so the research around burnout is interesting, because I think, it is something that is becoming more prevalent. And we know that essentially, I talk about stressors a lot, but I think, when we're talking about the science behind burnout, it's really about unprocessed emotions. And so that's fairly accessible. All of us have emotions. We have messy ones. We have nice, we have ones that we're proud of. But I think within the context of the messy ones, some of the feelings around sadness or grief or frustration or, anger even, that can be a really tough one to grapple with. And there's a lot of research that shows that when we don't process our emotions, that it can almost be like we're in a tunnel and we're stuck. And when we're stuck in that tunnel and we don't find ways to express those emotions or name the emotions, that we get sort of it's very easy to sort of get into this mindset of burnout where we feel overwhelmed, we feel a sense of apathy. Really what burnout is almost like a manifestation of those fight or flight responses. Because when we're in stress, we have this cortisol hormone. And it basically shuts everything down. It makes it so you can't digest food, in an effective way. It makes it so that you can't access your prefrontal cortex. That's the thinking part. That's the part that makes you do the connecting with people, the empathy. You can't access that part of your brain when you're in stress. And so when you picture students, teachers, parents, administrators who are in this state of stress, are in this cycle and feeling really challenged to come out of it, that yeah, it does lead to burnout. And there's so much research that shows that when you name your emotions, when you're able to get physical and work through those emotions in a physical way, that could be exercise, it could be a walk, but it's also laughing. It can be watching a funny movie, listening to a funny podcast, connecting with your staff, sitting with your students and just sharing a moment of joy. Like, these are the things that can pull us out of that stressed out place and remind us to get back into our body. So that's a little bit of the research. And yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Makes total sense.
There's research on both parts, that there's sort of the research in understanding the impact of burnout and stress on us, and then also the research on how to pull us out. And, as to the first part, I remember I was in my mid-20s, and I was the executive director of an educational nonprofit, and went out for a run one day and just pain down my leg, sciatica in my 20s, and when people were like, oh, you're stressed out, I felt belittled. Like, what do you mean? And now I think there's so much more information out there that there's actually physiological impacts from the stress. There's a much greater understanding of what you said, the cortisol, just all of what happens to your muscles, to your hormones, that it's not in your head, it's real.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that you say that, where it's almost like, it sounds as though the way that somebody might have said that to you is almost in a shaming way, like there's something wrong with you. Whereas when you think about it more like this is part of that self-compassion piece, where we think about what's the common humanity within this experience. I think that sort of takes it away from the suggestion that anybody should feel ashamed of feeling burnt out. I think this isn't anybody's fault. Sometimes we just kind of arrive at this state and it's kind of alarming. And to have somebody open instead with sort of suggestions or a book or an opportunity to sort of share with them how they feel, I think that's such a different approach than shaming someone for not sort of getting out of it through just sheer will, because it's not about toxic positivity. You really can't just will yourself to get out of that. You have to take some steps and be thoughtful and intentional. It takes time. Yeah.
See, I can totally see myself shaming Jen for her sciatic nerve. So
good thing I didn't know you then, Mike. We wouldn't be friends now.
So you developed a framework as part of writing this book and putting things together. And I'm a big fan of frameworks because I think they just help us explain and process the world in ways that just provide so much insight. And do you want to talk about your 5-part framework and maybe even how it relates to the CASEL social emotional learning framework? Because I think that's one of the points that I love out of your work is that, we have this framework for how we teach children about their own social emotional learning and wellness, but we don't tend to flip it around and apply it to ourselves. So you want to talk about the framework and kind of maybe we could go into each one a little bit and make sure we talk about strategies too.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Well, maybe I'll give you a broad overview first, and then we could dip into strategies, because I don't want to just ramble on for too long. So definitely want to have you be able to sort of dip in as well. I just thank you for mentioning, first of all, the framework and then also for the connection to CASEL. So there is a research point there, and I'm probably going to talk to that in more of a broad sense, because I think if we want to dig deeper into that, people can do the research around what every sort of element in that wheel is. However, there is research that has come out of a university in British Columbia that points to the fact that, yes, there's an increase in social emotional learning education in schools. And this is such a wonderful thing that we're seeing. We're really seeing this push toward a more holistic approach to teaching, and then including that within our lessons in multifaceted ways, right? Taking care of ourselves, taking care of others, taking care of our mental health, all of these pieces that are part of that social emotional learning wheel, what CASEL does most of their research on, right? Our ability to connect with others, all of these skills that are essential for innovation, creativity, collaboration, that most of, the top Forbes 100 companies are looking for people that are very well-rounded. This is what we want to do as educators, is sort of prepare our students for this very uncertain future by teaching them all of these things. The problem that researchers have found, however, is that many teachers themselves aren't practicing those well-being practices. And so what happens as a result is we really can't teach our students to take care of themselves, to develop the, the risk-taking strategies, to communicate effectively, to be able to reflect in a very sort of open-hearted way if we're not doing it ourselves. And so I think that's what this book is about is, hey, if we want to do this for our students, we also need to start with ourselves. And of course, within the context of the burnout, it fits as well. But I think it fit before, it's about how do we kind of tune into becoming the most wholehearted version of ourselves. We have work to do, some of us, right? I still do. It's never really an achieved thing. So essentially the framework is this. There are 5 main steps to the framework, and then an additional one within the book that kind of consolidates everything. You can dig deeper. So the first one is about reflecting. So within the context of reflecting, you sort of want to take stock of where you're at. And so this whole chapter is really just about checking in with your emotions, figuring out who it is that you are, what it is that you care about, and where you are right now in this moment. And so just very briefly, an example of that would be a strategy that I often share with teachers in professional development, which is just this. You can program in your phone 3 times a day this very simple strategy. So number 1, you're going to ask yourself these 3 questions, maybe in the morning, maybe at lunchtime, maybe at the end of the day. Number 1 would be, how am I feeling right now? So first, naming that emotion. The second one, where do I feel it in my body? So that's that mindfulness, the ability to just take a breath. Doesn't have to be a long time. Be like, where am I feeling it? That awareness, that reflection. And then thirdly, what do I need? And generally, when we're able to practice that just momentary mindfulness, we can get to an answer fairly quickly. So that's just an example. So that's kind of taking stock of where we are. Reflect.
I like that. It said you have to name it to tame it. Is that how it goes?
That's it.
Okay. So, all right. So that's the first step. Where do we go after? Now, are these linear steps? Are these things that happen, can happen in a different order? I mean, I'm sure the world is full of possibilities when it comes to how people apply this, but, from your perspective, from the research, did you see it as a progression?
Yeah, that is so interesting. I think for me, it's a choose your own adventure, because I think it makes a lot of sense if you go through in a linear fashion and you read the book in a linear fashion. However, it's easy to kind of zoom in maybe after you have a grasp on how this book is structured, and you can zoom into an area that you might want to focus on. And this is the really fun part about it, which I'll get to later. But when it comes to focusing on your goals, you can sort of align yourself in different areas depending on whatever month you are in or the year, what kind of focuses you have in your professional goals or your personal goals. And so you might have a personal goal that's based around connecting. And so you might want to zoom in on that chapter, right? But essentially, you can kind of use it the way that it works for you. But I like to do it in a linear sense, just so you understand the research, because there is sort of a progressive approach to it. So yeah, the next chapter is basically about reframing. So we start off at we know where we are. And so in figuring out where we are, we can often identify and find out some narratives that we hold about ourselves. I think oftentimes we have stories about our life or some of the beliefs we have about what we're capable or incapable of doing. We call those limited beliefs or sort of, restrictive beliefs about ourselves and our capacity in this world. And so what we can do in this next chapter, this reframe chapter, is about kind of honing our ability to be resilient and to sort of let go of the unhelpful narratives in our lives so that we can adopt a more helpful mindset. So it's really about resilience.
Can I add to that? One of the things I liked about this chapter is the focus on what you can control. So I know that, many of us during the pandemic, part of what's been so overwhelming is there's so much we can't control, right? How many of our students will contract COVID-19, and for new variants, there's so much we can't control. So I liked your focus on what it is we can control. And one of the things we can always control is our inner monologue. So if we can try to rewrite that, because I think we've all said negative things to ourselves and, speak to ourselves the way we would speak to a favorite student or a favorite friend, and really think about what we can control. And I love that part of this chapter.
I'd say
Thank you.
That is, Jen, that is next level newscaster. What's the word? I can't even.
Segue.
Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
So here we are. Now we're at reframing. So what's reframe mean in this context?
Yeah. So the reframing is just that ability to reframe and reimagine those narratives. So exactly. So an example would be, say you have this limiting belief of yourself in the classroom. I often connect with educators in in professional development sessions. And I often ask them, what's hard for you right now? Or what do you believe about yourself right now? And a lot of them are going, I feel like I'm so boring in the classroom. We're just trying to churn through all this curriculum. And I just feel like I'm not a very joyful teacher. It seems like not a big deal, but it is a big deal when so much of their identity has always been wrapped up in that feeling of joy. So their negative or their limiting self-belief is, I'm not fun anymore. And so being able to reframe that and go, you could say it like this. You could say, I'm feeling tired right now, but I'm capable of bringing joy into moments within my classroom. There's other things, around procrastination. Oh, I'm a procrastinator. Well, maybe you're an intentional critical thinker and it takes you a longer time to sort of consolidate your thoughts. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. Maybe when it inconveniences other people, for sure. But, I think that oftentimes we do, like Jen said, like we hold these negative beliefs about ourselves and we believe them as truth. And then we also feel like they're completely, it's written in stone. And so the ability to understand that we get to have an impact on the story that we write about ourselves and therefore the future as well. One piece I'd like to say, and I think this can come up, with parents or with any kind of conflict that arises, right, is also we don't need to be responsible for the narrative that other people may or may not have about us. That's the other piece. And I think that for me has been sort of like an ever evolving lesson and understanding, right? You can really only impact what you put out into the world, the trail you're leaving behind, and however people interpret that is really, that's their story, right? And so that's kind of comforting in a way too, to go, I am who I am, I'm proud of where I am, and then that's what you can leave with, right?
I love it. It does. It makes so much sense. And what I always tell people, no one thinks about you as much as you think about you. So, think about you and take care of you.
Exactly. That's right.
So reflect, reframe, refocus.
Mm-hmm. So now that you know where you've come from, right? And you have checked your narratives in such a way that all the maladaptive and unhelpful ones you sort of tossed out the window. You don't need those anymore. Now you're ready. It's like you've packed your bag. It's got all the right stuff and you're ready for the journey forward. And that's what this whole refocus piece is about. It's really about, where is it that you want to go in your life? And how do you want to do that? And what kind of an impact do you want to make on the world? And what is it that you once cared about that you want to tap back into? Because I think sometimes as adults, as busy teachers, as parents, whatever it is, it's like we lose sight sometimes of that kernel of passion or inspiration that first got us into the field. And maybe not always, but that's a big part of burnout too, is feeling like you've lost your passion, right? So now we've got the groundwork, we can point ourselves forward. And, I want you to imagine that you're almost like on this big, big boat, like a frigate or something. And all you have to do is just shift the boat just ever so slightly, just 1 degree into the general direction that you want to go, and have a lot of patience and to look at goals that way, to look at where you want to go in sort of an incremental and consistent way. And so that's what this chapter is about, is really about setting goals, intentions, and a vision for the direction you want your life to go.
I have to be honest, when I first thumbed through this chapter and I saw there was something on goal setting and SMART goals, I was like, wait a minute, what book about, like, what's the connection to burnout here? And then, I realized that, a lot of people don't think about goal setting when they think about burnout. Many people think about, mindfulness, reflection, but not necessarily goal setting. And I like how you explain that goal setting achieves 2 things. One, what you just spoke about, sort of reconnecting you to your passion. And the other thing is, part of burnout is being stuck, like not moving. So the idea of goal setting to propel yourself forward out of burnout. So I really appreciated the novelty of this particular aspect of getting yourself out of burnout. Not big, huge steps, but just what are some small steps, or like you said, the small degrees that you can pivot to begin to get out of burnout and to dream again. What were my passions? What did I want to do? Because we put a lot of those on hold during the pandemic because we were just trying to get through day by day.
Thank you, Jen. I feel the same. I feel that forward thinking is such an important part of of feeling like a wholehearted educator. I think to feel like we've got, whether it is professional goals or it's our own personal goals or it's a combination. They say, to be really great in the classroom, sometimes you got to look outside of yourself to bring that passion back in, right? So whether it's weaving or whatever it is that you want to get better at, pottery or writing or whatever it is, I think there's something really important about looking forward and just having that desire and the appetite for growth. When I didn't really mention this within the context of our needs, but we have these emotional needs and they're really, really important. And if we don't satisfy them in positive ways, sometimes we go after them in sort of maladaptive ways, right? So one of our emotional needs is for growth and for contribution. And so if we're not actively seeking an element of growth in our life, we do feel kind of flat or stagnant. So that can derive that sense of burnout.
Mm-hmm. Before Mike runs to the fourth R,
I'm still on this one.
Okay. Well, just a follow up that for your listeners, Morgane has some really nice templates to help you with your goal setting in the book. Sorry, Mike, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I thought it was particularly insightful how you suggest that people create categories for goals, because I think a lot of times when you just talk to people about, okay, set some goals, the universe of possibilities around goals, the big G goals is vast. And I think sometimes that stops people from actually moving forward. So I don't know what I'm going to work, whatever. Okay. But, family and friends, health and well-being, work and career, fun and leisure, like that really stuck out to me as like, okay, like that's effective. Cause I was with Jen too. I'm like looking at it going, SMART goals. Okay. All right. Totally makes sense. So now I'm going to push us ahead if that's okay.
That's okay.
All right. So where are we headed next?
Well, so we've come from the refocus, which is really around the goals. And can I just say one thing, because it connects to this next section? I think there's all sorts of research around how we can best sort of, and I might just have to sit on goals for just a little longer, how the research really shows that we need to involve others in our goals. Some of us have the mindset that really needs an accountability buddy, or that we need to write things down because there's research that says, that we are far more likely to actually achieve those goals if we write them down. Simple things that you're like, yeah, but if you don't do it, then you don't sort of get the benefit, right? So an example is I have these 6 a.m. I know, TGIM Monday calls with my best friend, who I think self-admittedly would say, if she could see herself now 2 years ago, she would have been like, there's no way I would have jumped on the phone with Morgane at 6 a.m. every Monday morning, but that's what we do. And so she's not like, we're different. And she loves it too. And we sit and we keep ourselves accountable and we talk for, 10, 15 minutes every Monday, and we address those goals. So sometimes it is family related, and sometimes it's about our careers, like report cards being due this week, for example. And sometimes it's just around, I need to infuse a little fun into my life. So yeah, we get an accountability buddy, because that really helps. And then this connects to the reconnect. So the next part in the book is really about, how do we invite, because when we think about burnout, again, that feeling of self-isolation is really, really common, right? You're tired, you don't have time for friends, like you just got to get home, make dinner, like do the churn. But what I suggest, I think here, is that we as human beings tend to do so much better in life. And actually there's research around just our mortality rates, even if we are connected to people. And so I suggest that we actually spend active, intentional time connecting with our colleagues in meaningful ways, our friends, our neighbors, our family members. And we can do that in lots of different ways. We can do that through online, but it can be as simple as picking 5 friends that maybe you haven't talked to in a really long time, and they've been kind of bumping around in your head, but because of COVID, you haven't really had a chance to connect, and just shooting them a quick text. It takes you literally 2 minutes. You could even be cheeky and copy and paste the same one. They would never know. And what you get from that is kind of the opening to that connection again with those people. I think in your staff room, making the choice to go for a walk, and if you have the time at lunch, and getting out with 1 or 2 colleagues and just having a nice time together, talking, not about school, maybe. These are all sort of some suggestions, but I have lots of other ways to connect, but it's just such an essential part of how we feel wholehearted as individuals, and therefore as teachers.
I like your very specific 7-day text challenge because it's very doable. Or you pick someone and you text each day something you want to celebrate, something small, and then you see how you feel at the end of the week. I really like that. And it also is important to remember, like, this is not just like, hey, we should be hanging out with people. This is research. This is science. If you think back to early humans, right? Did we sit around the campfire alone? No. Humans have always bonded together in groups. It's part of our human nature. So part of the feelings of burnout come from this separation, from literally doing school remotely, from being overwhelmed and not making those plans, as you suggested. But it is an actual, research-based reason why many of us are suffering. So
yes.
And I think it's an important acknowledgement that, education is a relationships-based business, and relationships take work. And I love that. I love that idea of taking things in bite-sized chunks and manageable goals like that. Very cool. And where do we go next?
Can I touch base? This is so classic. Here, I'll keep this short too. I just wanted to connect to what Jen just said about that empathy piece, because I think there's a bit about connecting that kind of calls back to that initial stress conversation we just had, where the cortisol that courses through your body, kind of serves to disconnect us empathetically and all of these bits and pieces, and that it actually will pull us apart. When we're in stress, it's very hard to feel empathy for others. It's also very difficult to connect in a meaningful way. The cool thing about connecting is that when you do so in a meaningful way, through kindness or just through like a lovely conversation or just through sitting together, that you actually get this dose of oxytocin in your body, which is the love hormone. And that oxytocin itself has been shown to correlate with blocking cortisol hormone. So literally the fact that you can connect with a human being in a meaningful and positive way can block your stress. So, I just think about that piece, just being a reason alone to just sit in that staff room a little longer at lunchtime if you can, because it's good for your stress levels.
Definitely. I couldn't have said it better. And I think, and again, like we're not just making this stuff up. I mean, this is from research. This is from our biology as human beings. And it makes total sense. So we've reflected, we've reframed, we've refocused, we've reconnected. Now what?
This is like my favorite part, because again, I think there's a novel, it's not something that much of this sort of self-development work focuses on, and that's creativity. So the next step is really about revealing who you are, revealing your truest expression of yourself as a human being. And that comes out through creativity. And a lot of people will probably be listening to this and being like, that's nice, I'm not creative. And I would beg to differ. Actually, you are. It's in the way that you garden. It's in the way that you prepare your meals. It's in the way that you pack your kids' lunches. It's in the way that you formulate your lessons. It's in the way that you speak to people and make them feel heard. It doesn't necessarily have to be like capital ART to be creativity. And I think the way that we weave our creativity and our expression into everyday life, the way that we speak to people, that is the essence of who we are coming through. And when we talk about burnout, I think the opposite of burnout is being our full, wholehearted self in a very open and honest and holistic way. And so I think that creativity is kind of the pinnacle of that. And there's research around flow. So when you're in flow, when you're creating something or you're deep into something that's got your creative brain going, it's almost like time passes, or, like the world doesn't matter, like you're just right in there. That has been found to be one of the most optimal states of happiness. Just hormone, they've done so many tests on this. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at. And they found that really that divergent thinking, or that ability to be creative, tends to go down when you're when you're an adult, but it's really only because it's an unsort of toned muscle. Like you have to work at it, but once you do, you can reaccess that, which is really exciting.
I like your term self-expression even more than creativity, because I think you're right. It does turn a lot of people off. And so I'm going to share this example of flow and self-expression that maybe many listeners can relate to. So how many people out there right now are obsessed with the game Wordle? Do you play it? Mike is my
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, you're my nerd partner. Oh my gosh. I'll send you a link. Anyway,
All right,
across
fine.
the country, hundreds of thousands of people are playing this game Wordle. And it's a little bit like Mastermind, that game from the 1970s, but with words. It's it's just a few minutes. It's 5 minutes. They only let you play one a day. But for those 5 minutes, you're completely absorbed. Now, am I creating something? No, not necessarily, but I am a little nerdy and I do like words and I like math and it gets me and I'm really in the moment. And, when you're stressed, it's like, oh, I don't have time for this, even though it's 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. That's why I like your use of the term self-expression. Like, who are you and what is it to get you in that state of flow,
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Love that.
So it's amazing how time flies, and I want to be sensitive to time here. Is there any other big parting shots that you want to make sure people take away from this conversation and from your work?
I'd like to I'd like to say this. I think so many educators are doing their absolute best right now. I think they are working so hard. I think many, many people in education right now are tired and they feel disheartened, maybe by the system, by a lot of things that are not within our control. But what I know is that if you tap back into the reason that you first got into this and you're able to set aside some time for yourself to reignite that passion for your life, even if it's outside of the classroom at first, that inevitably that will come right back. It will trickle down into your classroom and it will serve the students, because when you feel happy, when you feel wholehearted, when you feel like your life has meaning beyond the classroom, even that trickles back in. And it's so important that we take that time, even if it's just a few minutes a day, to give ourselves that gift. That way we get to be so proud of the legacy we leave behind and the kids that we affect.
That is so beautifully said. And if I can end with a quote by you, I love how Morgane puts this. She says, quote, "When you choose to author your own destiny, you have the power to live out a truly wholehearted and passionate existence." So I think that is a great note to leave on.
And I couldn't agree more. The intentionality that not only that you've approached this work with, but that that just emerges from it, that, just an awareness, being intentional about the things that you do for your own self-care beyond just saying, oh, go take care of yourself. No, it's not that easy. And Morgane Michael, the book is From Burnt Out to Fired Up, Reigniting Your Passion for Teaching. And I want to bring Claudia back in here because Morgane's work is part of a larger initiative that you all have going at Solution Tree. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
We have a new center now at Solution Tree, which is really a wellness solution center, because there are so many educators who are suffering from trauma and burnout and everything in between. And Morgane is part of that. But what I really want to tell her is that you're moving the needle, lady. We have entire schools now who are getting your book and they're using it for a whole faculty study. And at that point, it's not just helping one individual educator at a time. It's actually changing the culture of a building. And we know this. We want to take exquisite care of our educators so they can take exquisite care of our students. Thank you.
So where can people go to learn more about Morgane's book and the wellness center that y'all are working on?
Well, thanks for asking, Mike. Solutiontree.com. It will have landing pages for the Wellness Center, and certainly they can get to her book, but also through Amazon.
Outstanding. And ladies, thank you so much for what a fantastic conversation on International Women's Day. Love talking with smart people. Thank you. And thank you for putting this out into the world. The field needs it now more than ever. Can't wait to share some of these takeaways with my bride, because she was so excited that I was having this conversation today. And thank you.
Thank you. I'm so honored. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to me, Mike, at schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. And definitely pass the show along to your colleagues.